all I'll say is when you walk into the shul, there's this sense of you're walking into this bastion of tradition, of Masorah, of you're basically stepping out of the West Side as you know it, and you're going into a place that is really special. I remember the first time I was here for Tishrei, being wrapped with the sounds of the Chazanim. It's what I was looking for. When I was becoming observant, I think I always gravitated towards a place that felt not only Hamish, but that felt real, and where everyone who's in that place, they exude this sense of, this is who we are. Shul was very diverse. In other words, I could see on a typical Shabbos, you had a modern Orthodox, Lubavitcher, a few Streimlach, visitors, Israelis, Sephardim, and that made me feel at home as well, because I felt just this sense that just by being in davening there, you were part of the family. And I obviously started going to meals at Rabbi Vorhand's, and the hospitality, second to none. It's just a tremendous place that has made me who I am today. And I now live in Crown Heights, but every time I come into the West Side, I look forward to davening and learning at Heichal Moshe.
And I was born into a fairly assimilated secular family on the Upper West Side. And someone told me there's a Hasidic Rabbi in the neighborhood who used to know my grandparents. He was the Rav of Prague. So I decided I had to meet this man. So I went to the shul one time, and I met the Rav, Zochrona Livracha, and we schmoozed a little bit, and happened to be I met Rav Vorhand Shlita at the same time, and he invited me to come the next Shabbos to his son's bar mitzvah. So I'd never been to a frum bar mitzvah. I didn't know what to expect, but I ended up coming to the Shtieble. The place was packed, and the Rav spotted me from across the room. I think it was the middle of laning. He comes running over with a folding chair and gave me a chair. I can't tell you how much that meant to me. I felt so welcome, and I started to come to the shul on a weekly basis. Every Shabbos, I eventually started coming during the week, and it really became my shul. Eventually became Shomer Shabbos. People sometimes ask me, I wear a bekasha on Shabbos. I say, where'd you get the, Chassidish minhagim? So I say, I grew up in the West Side, in a Hamish Shtieble. And literally the shul is where I grew up. They helped me to become who I am today. So I want to say a big thank you to the Rav. You should continue with all your incredible work on Avodas HaKodesh of Torah and Chesed. Thank you.
I came back home to visit my parents, my wonderful parents, Le'em Shalom, here in the West Side, and I was looking for a place to daven. I went to some places, tried to find a mikveh, and eventually someone told me, go to Rav Vorhand, to Rav Zatzal. And I came here, and I was sort of low on money. I asked him how. I knocked on the door. He answered the door. I says, "Is there a mikveh here?" He goes, "Yes." I says, "How much does it cost?" He says, "It's not a business." First thing, welcome me in. Afterwards, I realized there was a pushka there, but first thing was welcome a yid into the shul, and he made me feel very welcome here. Whenever I showed up, he was happy to see me. Heard of a yid from the West Side, went to live in Eretz Yisrael. He was so happy, so excited. He followed my progress as I became a Hasid and moved to Tzfat and got married. He was always so excited and happy to see me. Always so welcoming. This is my second home. I had sometimes some conflict in the home because I was becoming religious. This is where I'd run to. This is my home to run to feel a place to rest, relax, learn, daven, tovel. And I remember the Rav so well. Every morning I'd watch him put on his talis. Ever saw Rav Zevi Vorhand Zatzal put on a talis? This is something that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Our community is blessed with wonderful chazanim. Among them, Rgoznitzky and Zevi Muller, who are close friends of all of us. And the Rav especially, they have agreed to minhana us the covet this occasion. It's our pleasure, it's a treat to hear from Benny and Zevi, the covet this medrash, covet the shul.
ואיש יום אתו לבוא יסיינו ואיש יום אתו לבוא יסיינו ולא בנו שלא יחוד בלבוד עמד עלינו לך לא יסיינו עמד עלינו לך לא יסיינו
Lo yeseinu Amad oleinu lecha lo yeseinu
Ve'akodosh bo'ero matzileinu matzileinu me'yodom Ve'akodosh
Good Tavach, everybody. Welcome, Heichal Moshe, to the annual Melave Malka of Heichal Moshe. This year it's virtual, but you can relax in your own dining room, living room, and be part of our Kehillah wherever you are. We have tonight a beautiful program, great speakers, we have Zmiris, and the main point is we're here to help our Kehillah. We were opened early on, we were available, our shul was open to Chiyuvim, those needed minyan, those needed just a place to be, to learn, to feel a sense of community. And we're here 24/7 for you. And especially this time of COVID-19, we need your support more than ever before to come back to full activities in our community, in our Beis Medrash. Again, Heichal Moshe, and you're all welcome to participate and help us achieve our goals.
In 1927, history shows that the property located at 303 West 91st Street was listed as a house for sale in the Properties Available section of Warts Brothers, New York, New York. At that time, 303 West 91st Street was the Jowett residence. When Rabbi Zevi Vorhand emigrated to the United States in 1949, he opened a shul on the west side of Manhattan. Initially, the shul located at 303 West 91st Street also served as a yeshiva attracting a growing Jewish population. Since then, the property itself has become a treasure trove of safe space for congregants of all types. And who was this Rabbi Zevi Vorhand who created such a cherished institution in Manhattan? Rav Zevi Vorhand was born in Betland, Romania in October 1912. The Rav's father, Rav Mordechai, was a Dayan in Betland and later was Rosh based in Nitra, and the Rav in Menchenik. The Rav's mother, Bracha, was the daughter of Rav Yehuda Lichtenstein, the Rav of Betland. Before his bar mitzvah, the Rav learned in Yeshiva Yesod HaTorah in Preshburg. Then he learned with his Zeta, the Makover Rav Moshe Vorhand in Mako. Over the course of 30 years, Rav Moshe Vorhand had thousands of Talmidim. After that, the Rav again learned in Preshburg by the Preshburg Rav. At the young age of 27, because of the rise of the Nazis, Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, Rav Zevi organized his first transport to save Jews by chartering a boat. He arranged for the escape of 1,200 Jews via ship to Palestine. During the war, the Rav was deported to Sachsenhausen work camp. After the Shoah, the Rav became the chief Rav of Prague, known as the Praga Ruv, where he established the Vad Hatzalah. He established the yeshiva in Marinovich, where his brother-in-law, Rav Yom Tov Stern, ran the daily operations as the Rosh Yeshiva. The Rav also helped many yeshivos by getting them food supplies and arranged exit routes to save institutions and lives. In 1946, the Rav married Nissel Rosner. During this period, the Rav saved thousands of war orphans and arranged housing for them in many orphanages, sending them eventually to safe havens. While coordinating post-war Jewish life in Prague, the Rav took it upon himself to charter boats that would take Yidden to Palestine. Transports were also arranged to England, to Canada, to South America, Australia, and anywhere where Jews could be safe. In November 1949, the Rav and Rebbetzin emigrated to America, starting a new life on the Upper West Side. The Rav became involved with Tomchei Torah, the Rabbis' Aid Society. The Rav also established HASC and many organizations, including Hatzalah of the West Side. In 1950, the Rav established Heichal Moshe, a shul with the yeshiva reflecting the Rav's midos, being all-inclusive, welcoming all Yidden. Rabbi Zevi Vorhand's action did not go unnoticed. His work was lauded by the great leaders of the Jewish communities across the world, including the Satmar Rebbe, the Square Rebbe, the Vishnitzer Rebbe, Rav Avram Kalmanovich, the Matastover Rav, Rabbi Lichtenstein, Rav Lando of Veretzli, and the Skalina Rebbe. The shul he established has become an attraction for many of the Torah luminaries from around the world, and to this very day, under the continued guidance, leadership, and hashpah of Rav Moshe Vorhand Shlita, the shul continues its trademark tradition of warmth, caring, simchas hachayim, Torah, and avodah.
Bruchim haboim b'shem Hashem. What a great schus, what a privilege it is that we are all united together in support of Heichal Moshe. It is fascinating that one time the great Satmar Rav, Rabbeinu Yoel, was asked by a new father, a father that just had a baby. He said, Rebbe, I would like to ask, do you think that I should call our new son by the name of my grandfather? The Satmar Rav said, it sounds like a wonderful idea. He said, but Rebbe, my wife also has a grandfather that was nifter, and he doesn't have a name yet. Would it be good to call him by that name? The Satmarov said, yes, that would also be a very nice idea. He says, but Rebbe, I have to tell you that in our family, we are descendants from a great tzaddik, and maybe it would be ideal to name after that tzaddik. The Satmarov said, that would also be a good idea. One of the Hasidim that were nearby, they just didn't go for this back and forth. And they said after the new father left, Satmarov, you have time on your level to be involved back and forth, this name, that name. The Satmarov said, I want to tell you a little secret. In Europe, back in Europe, you had to be a tata, a father in the home. But you had to be a Rebbe for the streets. Here in America, you got to be a Rebbe in your home, but a tata, a father for the streets. When we talk about the Progorov, when we talk about the great founder of Heichal Moshe, we are talking about a person that was a tata, a father for Klal Yisrael. In Europe, unfortunately with Chorban Europa, when the concentration camps existed, and when the Nazis thought they were going to annihilate every Jew, the Bel Zeruv once said that every Jew that is living after the Holocaust is a nace. All of the children, whoever were survivors, they were without material. They were without their physical needs, certainly without their spiritual needs. But there was one person, the Progorov, that went to see it that every single child would have what they needed, that every child would somehow be reintroduced to their Jewish roots. He was called the rescuer of children. This is the greatest title that anybody in Klal Yisrael could have. Someone that cares about Hashem's children. V'chol bonayich limudei Hashem. That we should all be learned, every child, no matter where, no matter when, no matter what background, no matter the intellectual capabilities. Can you imagine the Yisomim, those orphans of the war? Can you imagine when they finally emerged and were rescued to the grace of Hashem? Can you imagine how much they needed, what they needed? The Progorov was the one who went to all the children and gathered them up and saw to their needs, physical and spiritual, to their Rgoznitzky needs. What an unbelievable idea it was that in Prague, this is what he saw himself, as Moshe Rabbeinu, as a shepherd of Klal Yisrael. He moved here to America, and in America, opened up on the west side. Children knew where to go. Parents knew where to go. That they should have an osid, that there should be a Jewish future, that it would not be a question of a Jewish future. And he himself formed that great building that exists to this very day. That is a bastion of faith. That is a beacon of light, an or legoila. It's a light to the exile, where everybody and anybody can come. On those times when I was zoichet to be together with the great tzaddik today, Vorhand Shul, the Rebbe today, how unbelievable it is. How unbelievable it is that everybody finds their place. I was contacted by parents living in Brooklyn, and they said, you know, when our son moved to the Upper West Side, we really weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure if he was going to go to shul. We weren't sure that he was going to carry on our Masorah, our tradition. But he found all of a sudden, Rabbi Vorhand, he feels more at home than he ever did here at home. He has a place that he calls his own. And when he is going to be married, he said the only place he wants a Sheva Brachos is in the shul.
My relationship with Rav Vorhand goes back and stretches for quite a while. We lived in the Upper West Side from the time that I was 9 years old until I got married. I lived in the Upper West Side. One of the first Batei Medrash that we davened in, even though we lived on 101st Street and the Vorhand Shtieble was some blocks away, and there were a number of Shtieblach and Shuls in between, but my father wanted very much to daven with Rabbi Vorhand. And Rabbi Vorhand was this really towering personality who had been so prominent in the critical years immediately after the Churban of the Shoah. Rabbi Vorhand was prominent before that too, and he was a Rav, and he was in Prague, but his true importance was Dafka after the Churban and with respect to the survivors of the Holocaust. Rav Vorhand was a person who had command of languages, and he was a person who had entree into circles where most religious Jews, most Rabbonim, would not be expected to have any entree. He dealt with the entire gamut of the personalities that were relevant in Prague and Czechoslovakia, which included non-Jews as well as Jews, and included irreligious Jews as well as religious ones. He was responsible for maybe hundreds and hundreds of chasanas that happened in Prague after the war, where the Sheres HaPleita started to rebuild their lives. And in many ways, he was at the beginning. I always say that at a chuppah, when the chas and kala come together under the chuppah, that is the first moment when the Shechina presents itself to them. We know that Ish v'Isha Shechina Shruya Beinehem, and the house of Torah and of Yiddishkeit, a house of mitzvahs, a house of Tara and Kedusha, is a house that HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells in, not just husband and wife, but the HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells amongst them. This is a mikdash ma'ad of its own. But when does that begin? It begins with the chuppah, because the chuppah is really representing, as many of the Mefarshim say, that the chasna and kala, when they come together under the chuppah, that's the first moment that they're building their home. And as public as it is, it's still their home. That's why in many minhagim, the chasna comes out a little bit to bring the kala into the chuppah, as if he were bringing her into his home. And the Shechina also comes. There's a Zohar that says that ancestors come to the chuppah, but it's not just the ancestors. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chvodo v'atzmo, the Shechina comes. What's my point? My point is that Rav Vorhand, Reb Zev Tzvi Vorhand, Zechronu Livrocha, Zecher Tzadik v'Kodesh Livrocha, he facilitated that the Shechina should come to the rebuilding of so many Jewish homes whose parents were not there anymore, whose relatives were no longer there, who were all alone in the world. And Rav Vorhand was the Masada Kedushin, and there was the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam in the rebuilding of Klal Yisrael. Hundreds and hundreds of times. What is my impression of Rav Vorhand? So I'll tell you something very interesting. I was born immediately in fact, I don't think the ink was yet dry. The end of World War II. The war had not yet ended, and I was born. I was born in a place called Bialystok. How it is that I was born in Bialystok is almost an accident. That place was the place of my birth. Really, my family is from Vilna, quite a distance from Prague, Czechoslovakia. Distance in many ways, not just geographically. My family was from Vilna, their parents, their ancestors, all Litvische from Vilna, father and mother. My mother was born in Vilna, my father was born in a little town called Venishok right outside of Vilna. My father was a Yosef at a very young age. He lost his mother when she gave birth to him. He never knew his mother. And he lost his father when he was 9 years old. So at the age of 9, he was a Yosef through and through. And for many years, he kind of wandered from yeshiva to yeshiva. He gained a very, very good chinuch. He gained a great Torah education, but he was really all alone in the world. He decided to get smicha. He was in the Mir Yeshiva at the time. In the Mir Yeshiva, you didn't get smicha. Smicha meant that you left the yeshiva. So he went to Vilna, he got smicha, and he actually got a shtela, and he also got married to my mother. She was a very choshev lady, one of the prominent young ladies in Vilna, and life was looking pretty good. The Yosem now had a family. He had a wife, and he had a shtela, he had a parnosa. And then Hitler came and put an end to it all. My parents were fortunate enough to survive, but they lived like rats in a sewer, hiding in attics, hiding in cellars, hiding wherever they could, with many traumatic moments when their lives were threatened. And my father used to recount miracle after miracle. They were in Vilna ghetto the entire time till what is called the Befreiung, till the liberation by the Russians at the end of the war. How many Jews survived the Vilna ghetto? A little over 200. And they were two of those 200. Subsequently, I was born in Bialystok. They were on their way. They were trying to find a place where they could get papers, they could restart their life, and they ended up, when I was just several months old, in the second largest city of Poland, which was Lodz. We called it Lodz, like with a G, Lodz. In Polish, it's Lodz. So Lodz was the second largest town, and they had some measure of government, and there was a very, very strong She'eris HaPleita that came to Lodz. They kind of descended from all over, the few that survived. You know, by the way, that 95% of Lithuanian Jewry was wiped out, either by the Litviner, the Lithuanians, or by the Nazis. Yemach Shmam v'zichram. So there was almost nobody left. Poland, of course, the brunt of the Jews of Poland were also destroyed. But there were enough left that there should be a central gathering, as it were, in Lodz, and that's where my parents went, hoping to find some way of getting to America or Eretz Yisrael, wherever these She'eris HaPleita ended up. They had no papers, they had no money, but they had this little baby, that's me. And my mother was crossing the street in Lodz, and she was hit by a trolley and she was killed. I was exactly 7 months old at the time, so I didn't know my mother either. My father, I'm constantly amazed that he kept his emunah. It became even stronger. And my mother is buried in Lodz. We have pictures of the grave. And he made his way towards Prague with this little baby on his hands. With his little Arela, his son, on his hands. An infant. They came to Prague with the hope of somehow getting from there. I'm not sure of the details, what was special about Prague, but apparently it was a very big center for the She'eris HaPleita as well. V'haraya, there was these hundreds of chasanas, and a yeshiva was established, and all of this was happening by this incredible personality, I call him a towering personality, by the name of Rav Zevi Vorhand. Rav Vorhand was the person, the go-to person, the person who made things happen, the person who got papers for you when it was almost impossible to accomplish. He was connected to the American embassy. He was connected to all the other embassies. He was a principal with generals and with all kinds of members of parliament and authority. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Wherever there was somebody that could help a Jew, could somehow bring some comfort to a Jew, there was Rabbi Vorhand making it happen. My father came, my mother, the only mother that I knew that raised me, was at that time hired to take care of me. She was taken in, she was also a survivor, went through a horrible period of her life in the Holocaust, and my father in Prague married her. We were 2 years in Prague. My father spoke about Rabbi Vorhand and what Rabbi Vorhand did for us in terms of getting papers for us. Eventually, we came from Prague. We ended up in Southampton, England, the port of Southampton, on the Queen Mary, and we came on the Queen Mary to the United States in 1948. I was 2.5 years old. My father used to speak about Rav Vorhand with such glowing accolades, with such incredible deference, with such reverence, that when he said that we're going to be davening, we're moving to the Upper West Side and we will be davening in the Rabbi Vorhand's Shtieble, I was expecting to see a person at least 10 feet tall, and a person with extraordinary articulation, a person that was charming and irresistible in terms of just the way he presents himself, his bearing. And I come into the Shtieble for the first time, And I'm looking around for this towering personality. And I don't see anybody that's 7 feet tall, certainly not 10 feet tall. And in fact, I discovered that Rav Vorhand is a very short man. And what made it even more incredible was I started talking to him. And Rav Vorhand spoke many languages. But in every one of those languages, I couldn't figure him out. He was what you might almost call a kvad peh. He certainly was not the articulate personality whose resonant tones would charm people. And I asked myself, where did he get his koyach from? And I came to the conclusion, even as a 9-year-old, that this is because of 2 things. The extraordinary heart and love for Klal Yisrael that this unusual person had. His openness, his forthrightness. The people that he spoke to, I don't even know if they were listening to his words. They got the gist of it. They knew that he needed papers. They knew that he needed favors. But what really made the mark was that they saw a person who was willing to give his life, was giving to live every minute of his day, every bone in his body for another Jew. He was so transparently full of love, full of honesty, full of integrity, that it was worth, the picture that they saw of this man was worth more than 1,000 words. And that's what I saw as well. The warmth, the kindness, the generosity. And I realized, and it was a tremendous lesson for me, a lesson for the rest of my life. It's still a lesson for me. Whenever I think about this man, and I do quite a bit, I always think, it doesn't really require the sophistication and the charm that everybody expects to make an impression. The best impression is made when you have an open heart and a giving and caring heart. And this is exactly what Rav Vorhand was and what Vorhand represented. You cannot imagine how much this man accomplished, how much he accomplished in the period when he was needed the most. And he helped, he saved Jews, he helped them, he put them on their feet, he got them money, he was connected to the Aguda, he was connected to the joint, he was connected to the Vadat Sola. Whatever it was, he was connected, and a lot of money passed through his hands, none of it remained with him. He was really a tremendous tzaddik, an unbelievable tzaddik. And I remember many conversations that I had with him subsequently. And I always had to try to hang on to those words and figure out what he was saying. Whether it was, even in Yiddish, which was, for me and for him, our Mama Lashon. All right, he didn't speak a Litvish Yiddish, but that wasn't the issue. But I got the gist of what he was saying, because it was all love and more love, affection and more affection, caring and even more caring. And this is the Roshem, this is the impression, this is the image that remains with me. And I think and hope that it's the image that I've conveyed when I speak about him to my Rebbitzin, to my children. And when we had a dinner, wasn't that long ago, I had the opportunity to convey more or less what I'm saying now at the Melave Malka of the Beis Medrash, which his son, of course, is now the Rav, together with his Eishes Chayil. And I wish them just incredible Hatzlacha. I hope that the Beis Medrash, which is a Shem Dover, it's something special in the whole of the Upper West Side, which has a number of very wonderful shuls and Batei Medrash. But this Vorhand Shul, Vorhands, that's something very special. And it's special in many different ways, but I think that the aura of the place is still what Reb Zev Tzvi left. He planted in that makom a certain aura, a certain kedusha, a certain appreciation that when you rise to the occasion and you really care about Eden, you can accomplish tremendous, tremendous things. And I keep thinking about all those chasnas and the Shekhinah coming down, as I mentioned earlier, and just simply, it was Rav Vorhand, and maybe he was the one, not just Chosen Kala, but maybe he was the one that brought the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wherever he went. And maybe that's what all the people were so inspired about. They felt Kedusha, they felt purity, they felt honesty, they felt love.
At this time, we kindly ask the waiters to please stop serving. Thank you.
What an unbelievable thing it is that throughout this past year, and I would rather not speak about it, the shuls have become Yakar Metzias, something so precious and so dear. Each one is a diamond. If they weren't before last year, they certainly are now. Somachti ba'omrim li beis Hashem nelech. Dovid HaMelech, oh, I was excited. Oh, I was so happy. I was overjoyed. Beis Hashem nelech, when I was able to go to shul. What Heichal Moshe does for Klal Yisrael now is more important than what has ever gone on in the past over all the years. I can be made, I can testify to the greatness of the activities, to the greatness of the shiurim, the greatness of the Torah, the greatness of the tefillas, the greatness of Rav Vorhand, and all that he does for Klal Yisrael. But Rabbi Sai, he needs our support. He needs our encouragement. You think it's easy? You think it's easy to put together a budget? You think it's easy to keep some place running when there's all new guidelines and rules every day? It takes someone with superhuman kochos. But an interesting idea was, Moshe Rabbeinu, he had to hold his hands up all the time. He had to hold those hands up and it was difficult. So what happened? Hashem gave to him, Aharon from each side. They held his hands up. Why? Because the great tzaddik Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, Videi Moshe kvedim. The hands of Moshe were too heavy. He was going to put them down. But Hashem helped that he had others that helped to hold up the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the prototype for all the generations that we should support the tzaddikim, the leaders, the manhigim. Videi Moshe kvedim. Rav Moshe Vorhand Shlita, our Rebbe, the Morad Asra, the leader, the spiritual guide in the West Side, from that place that has been an Or Legoyle for how many years? Videi Moshe Kvedim. The hands of the great Rabbi are heavy. They're difficult to hold up all of the activities of the shul, all of the things that the shul does and all the people that they help and encourage. I call out with my small voice to everybody, whoever is gathered right now, watching or in person or wherever you're at. Please hear my plea. It's from my heart. Devar mayotzi min halev. If you can, do whatever you could to show the great Rav Moshe Vorhand that we remember on the 20th Yahrzeit, we remember that there was such a tzaddik as the Praga Rav, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, all that he wanted to do. And we ourselves say, please continue that work, because that is the work that is going to bring the Geula Shalema. May you all have bracha v'hatzlacha, blessing and great success, beruchnius ubegashmius, spiritually and materially, and all that you do. Great simchas, good health. All the family and all the children should go b'derech haTorah, in the way of our fathers and mothers. And Bez Hashem, may we all celebrate together the Geula Shalema b'mheira.
Tonight is our annual fundraiser. This year, especially due to the corona, the shul wasn't able to properly be available for everybody during the peak of the machla. We're back though. We need your support to get the programming back, the shiurim, all the activities of the shul. Baruch Hashem, we have every day minyan, first minyan, second minyan, Mincha Maariv, Shabbos, Kiddush, Alashudis, Daf Yomi, other shiurim. We need your help though to continue to prosper and to give back to the community. So please be forthcoming, be generous, and think of us as your home away from home. It's now my pleasure to introduce our Mother Ashra, Rav Moshe Vorhand Shlita, who is spearheading our shul in this COVID-19 year. The Rav and the Rebbetzin Sarah are involved in chesed 24/7, whether it's shidduchim, chanasas archim, whether it's involved in shiurim for the ladies, for the men, for Tilling groups. The Rebbetzin and Rav are behind a lot of endeavors to enhance our community, to help our Kehillah, help Klal Yisrael, locally and nationally. The phone does not stop ringing by the Rav and Rebbetzins house. It's our pleasure and treat to ask the Rav, my lifelong chaver, to please address us, give the bracha, the covered occasions. Without further ado, Rav Vorhand Shlita.
Good Vach, welcome all to the special gathering this year, where we are in unusual times, and therefore we have a very unusual Melave Malka this year. I want to thank my Yidid, Rav Menachem Pollack, for being there, for being here for us throughout all these years, being an MC at all our Melave Malkas. May Hashem bless him so that he carries on for many years with nachas and good health, together with his mishpacha. The Torah says in Parshas Hazinu, "Zchar yemais olam, binu shnois dar v'dar." Remember the days of yore, of old. Consider the years of each generation. History is an integral part of our life. The Torah, we have many mitzvahs that tell us to remember the past. Zevi, Yitzias Mitzrayim, to remember the Hashem's hands in the Midbar, to remember the Ma'amad HaSinai, remembering different events in our history. That's part of that's part of our mitzvahs, sechiras. And the Torah tells us to remember the days of old. This year is the 20th Yahrzeit of my father, Zechariah Avrocha, Zecher Tzadik Avrocha, a pillar in post-war and in pre-war history. He had saved many thousands of Yidden, and he helped build and establish many very important institutions in post-war America. And as well as Eretz Yisrael, he helped support many moistes for Yisaimim and other moistes as well, Torah moistes. This forum bring a question: why does it say Zechar Yemais Olam? Remember the days of old, of yore. Understand the years of every generation. It seems redundant. So this forum explain that shnois, the years, could also mean shnois, the changes. Shnois davidar. Every generation has different circumstances, and those, by remembering the past, we could apply to the changes that we experience in our circumstances, the changes that affect us. Last year we went through a tremendous change, not only here in America, but throughout the whole world. And it affected the way we learn, the way we daven, the way we do tzedakah, kindness to others, because we're separated from each other. We're distanced from each other. Hashem should give us the understanding so that we make the proper adjustments to understand what we have to do to be together and to be makar ourselves through these changes and these circumstances. And may this year be a year of many blessings where we could get together and appreciate all the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, the small things that we weren't able to do in this past year, so that we could grow and be much better. Thank you so much for joining us, and may you have blessings of the new Vach, the new year, and Yontif.
Li beisecho lir beisecho ve'yishe Yisroel usvilosom meyelo behavos kapel oy oy ben rotzoin Lerotzoin etomid avoid as Yisroel amecho v'yishe Yisroel usvilosam meheyelo be'avos kabel oy oy berotzoin Das ist so elam necho Verzeno Eineinu B'shuv Chalatziyah Berachamim Verzeno Eineinu B'shuv Chalatziyah Berachamim Ay veshom navodcho Dante oy beiro Dante ki me yoy lo mukshonim kamoyni yoy Veshom navodcho Futter oy beiro Futter ki me yoy lo mukshonim kamoyni yoy
And now it's our pleasure to hear from Yehuda Green, our very own Yehuda Green, who davens regularly, who's mahanas regularly, will give us a message of inspiration of why this shul is so special to him and to all of us. Yehuda Green.
Shalom Aleichem to everyone. This is Yehuda Green. I want to express myself how important the shul Heichal Moshe is, what it means to me. Living here in the Upper West Side, especially these days, there's no better chizuk than having the shul of Heichal Moshe. But this is mamish like a Beis Mikdash me'at, and it's, you feel yourself at home. To be here in the morning is amazing. If I can be here very early in the morning, which I did a few times, I was so excited. To be here with Choshev Eden like Rabbi Kes, like the president of the Vorhand Shul, Rabbi Shayelin, and Rav Polak, and with the Choshev Vorhand who runs this amazing shul over here. To be here for Mincha and Ma'ariv, it's mamish zchus here. I'm so thankful to Hashem for this shul by my side here on the Upper West Side. And I was not zoiche yet, but I had this amazing thing that the Rav is doing, hosting people Friday nights and Shabbos day. I hope one day I'll invite myself. I know for a fact how many people who are coming here Shabbos and staying here for the meals by him. It's mamish Gan Eden. Our Vorhand is doing mamish an amazing service for the community. It's such a holy shul. May Hashem continue to give him a lot of chizuk and atzlocha. And this is mamish. How can I describe the Rav? Oisik b'tzorchet tzibur be'emuno. So when Hashem gave me the song, v'chomish oisik b'tzorchet tzibur be'emuno, is mamish is the right person who deserves that blessing, that Hashem shall give him Boch and Atzocha B'chol Ma'aseh Yadav. B'chol mi shehoiskim בצורכי ציבור באמונו הקודש ברוך הוא ישלם שכם ויוסיר מהם כל מחלו וירפא לכל גופם ויסלח לכל עוונם וישלח בוכו והצלחו בכל מעשה ידיהם עם כל ישראל אחיהם ונאמר אמן. So mamish want to end up again a große shekoach. Thank you to the Rav Vorhand and his Rebbetzin. You should continue to do a lot of great things for the community, for the tzibur. Hashem bless them. Should be zoiche. They have a special space in Beis HaMikdash with this holy shul in Yerushalayim HaKodesh. Me'ero be'emeinu. Kol tov everybody.
Weil jeder Kibbutz und die Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und die Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und die Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und die Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da. Der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da. Der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da. Der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da, der Rebbe ist da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Weil jeder Kibbutz und Chassidim ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. Als der Talmid hat gesagt, als der Rebbe da ist der Rebbe da. La 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 la.
I'm deeply grateful to Rabbi Moshe Vorhand Shlita for having invited me to come to speak to all of you at this virtual Melave Malka of your wonderful shul, Heichal Moshe. I'm grateful as well to Rabbi Moshe Gottlieb, who is the videographer and who over the past couple of weeks has provided me with so much background and information of your wonderful shul. As we approach the Heilige Yom Tov of Pesach, I would like to share with you a very moving story that happened in the concentration camp on the night of Pesach with a father and a son. Both of them, Nebuch, were shuddering, they were in terror, and they were both emaciated. But they tried to relive the Sidorim that they had when they were back with their families. The beautiful faces, the shiny silverware and table and everything, and that was only a memory. And the young boy began saying the Manishtana. And the father listened as the boy remembered it. And then after he finished, he said in Yiddish, Tata Leben, ich will dich fragen, noch ein Kasha. I would like to ask you one more question. And he said, are both of us going to be alive next year so that I'll be able to answer and ask you these questions? The father was surprised and taken aback by that question. And he looked up at his child and a tear rolled down his cheek. And he said, we don't know what our fate will be. We don't know what's going to happen to us, but one thing I can guarantee you, next year at this time, there will be boys your age throughout the world that will be asking their fathers the Manishtana. And then he said, Yidden have always remembered the past because that's what gives us fortification for the future. And he said something so amazing. He said, you know, we start our day by reciting Shema, and in Shema, when we daven it, we say and remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. At the end of the day, we also close the day by saying Shema, and once again, we remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. It represents the beginning of time when we became a nation in Mitzrayim, and it represents the end of time when Mashiach comes. And the reason that we remember Yetzias Mitzrayim throughout our history is because it shows us that throughout the years and throughout the millennia, the nations of the world have ruled us, and they thought that they would out-survive us. They've ruled us sometimes very, very harshly in so many different places, and sometimes for hundreds of years. But at the end, it is we who survive, not they. And that's why we have to remember the past to be fortified for the future. And when I heard this moving story, I was reminded of two very important comments. The first one is something that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Klal Yisrael. It was his final speech. And the pasuk is in Dvarim Lamed Beis, pasuk Zayin. It's an Azinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, Zechor Yemoi Solam. Remember the days of yore, Binu Shnois Dar V'Dar. Understand the years from generation to generation. Sha'al Avicha V'Yagetcha. Ask your father, he'll relate it to you. Zikenecha, your elders, V'Yamrulach, and they'll tell it to you. They know the past. They're going to help us prepare for the future. And you know what Rabbi Lezman Shach, you know what he once said? A Jew who is not tied to the past has no hope of being connected to the future. That's why we need to always know the past. And that to me is the beauty of your shul. This Melave Malka tonight is called From Prague to the West Side. Because Rabbi Vorhand Shul, he understood very well that the only way we can prepare for our future, especially in these difficult times, is by focusing on the past, learning from the past, and preparing for the future. Now, I've been to Prague numerous times. I've led numerous tours there. And I want to share with you one of the most exhilarating things that I tell people that the Maharal told us many years ago. I always say this at his gravesite, as his matzeva, and I believe that tonight all of us will be able to gain a perspective of connection. Listen to this. The Maharal asks, where does the word tefillah come from? We know tefillah means davening, praying. But what's the origin of the word? And he says something brilliant. If you take a look, and we all remember the sad story, how Yakov Avinu didn't see his son Yosef for 22 years. And now, at the end of his life, in Parshas Vayechi, Bereshis Mem Ches Yud Aleph, Yakov says to Yosef, the pasuk tells us, Vayeme Yisrael el Yosef. Yisrael, of course, is Yakov. And Yosef, or Yakov, says to Yosef, Ra'oi fanecha loi filolti. Seeing your face, loi filolti. Rashi says, what does that word filolti means? Loi milani libi lachshev machshev. I never had a thought process. It never even occurred to me that I would see you. Zok the Heilige Maharal, you know, that word tefillah comes from filolti. It's a thought process. Of course, if we come to shul and we just say the words, even if we don't know what they mean, there is some value to that. But really, tefillah's connection. That's a thought process. Just like I am thinking every word that I'm talking to all of you now. And even though we're doing this through a camera, still we are making a connection. When a person davens, says the Maharal, that's the time of connection. The Maharal in Prague taught us what connection is all about. And when I think about that, that's what your shul is all about. Connection. Because this year is the 20th Yahrzeit of Rab Zev Tzvi Vorhand Zeichet Tzadik V'Kodesh Levracha. And if there's one word that you could say about him that defines his essence, and that was connection. He connected with all kinds of Jews in all kinds of situations. He was known as the Prague Rav. And as I read and I spoke to people, it is incredible what this one human being did after World War II. There were thousands that had survived in different ways. Some were able to exist in the camps, others were hidden by other people, and others even hid in the mountains. But when they came back to their hometowns, there was nothing for them. They all came to Prague. And who was the Rav of Prague? Rab Zev Tzvi Vorhand. And you know what he did? He connected. He connected with them by starting schools, starting organizations, building shuls, getting them food, getting them money, but more than anything else, getting them visas. He knew, even though that Czechoslovakia was free at that time, he knew it couldn't last. He knew it wouldn't last, and he had to get the people out. And he got them to England and to Holland and to Belgium and to Canada and to Israel and to the United States. And I'll tell you something amazing. You know, when I go to Auschwitz and Majdanek, I always tell people 6 million is a lie. It's not 6 million, it's 60 million. You know why it's 60 million? Because what about all their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? I can tell you, when I went to the Ukraine and I stood at the memorial of Babi Yar that commemorates all those people that were killed, all those Jews that were killed, I was so taken aback by the pasuk right at the bottom of that memorial. It kind of hit me by surprise, but it was the perfect pasuk. And that pasuk was what Hashem said to Cain. Koil demei ochicha tzoyekim elayim min ha'adama. The bloods of your brother. What does it mean, the bloods? He killed one person, he killed Hevel. No, Rashi is telling us, you killed Hevel, but what about his children, and his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren? And if that's the case, by the same token, we have to stand in awe of Rav Zev Tzvi Vorhand. Because if 6 million is really 60 million, then the thousands that he got out of Prague to their free countries, it's not thousands, it's hundreds of thousands. Because all those people have had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And that's what your shul is all about. Following his derech of connection. And when I see and I read and I hear that Rav Vorhand was so beloved by all the Gedolim, Rabbi Aharon Kotler came to Prague, Rabbi Avraham Kalmanovich came to Prague, Rabbi Leza Silver, Dr. Solomon Schoenfeld, Rabbi Isaac Alevi Herzog, Recha Sternbuch. They knew this is the man of connection. And that's why when he came to America, he built a shul of connection. Take a look. All of you that are watching on Zoom, all of you who come to the shul, you know that your shul is open to everyone. Everyone can come, everyone can sing, everyone dances together, everyone learns together, everyone davens together. That's connection. That's what Heichal Moshe is all about, connection. And through Rav Moshe Vorhand Shlita, it is so beautiful that he continues the legacy of his father of connection. So what's our future? What's our vision for the future? And we need a vision, especially during these difficult times. So I want to share something with you. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can go online and you will get the letter that I am about to read, part of it, about a pandemic that happened in 1831. The Gadol Hador, Rabbi Akiva Eger, Zeichet Tzaddik V'Kodesh Levracha, the brilliant Torah scholar, wrote a letter to Rabbi Leo Gutmacher, who asked him, Rabbi, there are hundreds of thousands dying, what should we do? And he writes a whole letter about social distancing. It's amazing. And he tells people to keep away from sadness. And he tells them to say Tehillim. But then, listen to what he writes. And I want to encourage every one of you to do this. I would never ask you to do anything that I don't do myself. But ever since I read this letter, I do this twice a day. And you know, we should all do this. Because this is a Makom Tefillah. And what Rabbi Akiva Eger says is that every day, before Shacharis, during Shacharis and Mincha, we should say the Parsha of Keteras. Keteras are the spices that were brought in the Beis HaMikdash. They were brought in the Mishkan. Rabbi Akiva Eger doesn't explain why, but he says it's very important that we should say it twice a day. And I want to show you something. I want to tell you why I believe all of you at Heichal Moshe and all Yidden in the world should be saying Keteras twice a day. There's a Zoyar in Parshas Vayakel. Listen to this Zoyar. Dovar ze gezeira hi omedes lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is a gzeira that stands in front of Hashem, and it says like this: Shekol mi shemistakel, anybody who concentrates, v'koirei b'chol yeh ma'aseh hakteres, anybody who reads and concentrates on Keteras every day, yinotzel mikol hadvorim haroim shabaylam. He's going to be saved from all evil in the world. That's the idea. Say Keteras, it's going to save you. And you know what he says? Mikol pagoyim roim, bad thoughts, bad judgments, death, everything, it's going to save you. Why? I'll tell you what I think. Take a look at Keteras. It has a lot of spices, 11 spices. The third one is chelbana. It's not a good smelling spice, it's a foul smelling spice. But it's in there. You know why? It represents all kinds of Jews. Not everybody is as religious as you are. Not everybody is as committed as we are, but they are our brothers and sisters. We have to love them. Rabbi Vorhand, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Lavrocha, saved all kinds of Jews. It made no difference whether they were Orthodox or not Orthodox. They were Jews. They were our brothers and sisters. And that's what the beauty of your shul is all about. Connection, ketores. Say ketores. That's what Rabbi Akiva Eiger wants from us. I think that's the vision of the future. More love, more openness, more embracing. That's really what we need more than anything else. So before I tell you one story, which I think is the greatest COVID story that I know, I want to tell you one more thing. If you take a look at Parshas Truma, it tells us about the Kruvim. Now all of you know that the Kruvim, the cherubs, they were wings. They had wings over the Aharon. And there were two faces on the bottom of those wings. Now listen what the Pasuk says, and we will see the genius idea of Rabbi Yitzchak Kahn Spector, the Kovner Rav, what he said about this Pasuk. The Pasuk tells us, "V'hayu hakruvim persei knafayim l'mayla." The kruvim, they wings spread l'mayla, upward. Upneihem ishalachav. The two faces, the face of the little boy and the face of the little girl, they were towards each other. And you know what Rabbi Yitzchak Kahn said? That's the essence of what a Yid is all about. Hands l'mayla, the wings towards heaven, in tefillah, in Torah, in commitment of mitzvahs. But that's only ben adam lamokim. Upneihem ishalachiv. Don't forget the ben adam lachaverai. That's, you need both. That's what Heichal Moshe is all about. That's what the Vorhands have always stood for. Connection, not only to Hashem, but to each other. That's the vision of the future. We get together at this virtual Melave Malka to make a commitment to embrace each other, to care for each other, and to make sure that we have that love of a fellow Jew, like the Vorhands have had, and continue to have till this very day. I just want to end with this fabulous story. It happened a year ago in Lakewood, New Jersey, and it was told to me by Mrs. Devorah Monk. She had lived with her husband, Rabbi Yakov, for many years in Borough Park, and then after all those years, she moved to Lakewood because her children and grandchildren lived there. Nebuch, shortly after they moved, and this was 5-6 years ago, her husband got sick and passed away. So, of course, it was terrible, but at least she had her children and grandchildren near her. And last year, when the COVID situation got terrible, she began to realize she was going to have to be at the Seder alone, not with her children and grandchildren, and certainly they couldn't come to her. And she was frightened. It was very daunting to think that this woman, who told me she had never, ever been alone at a Seder. As a child, she was with her parents. When she got married with her husband and her children and grandchildren, how was she going to manage this? She has a neighbor, and I spoke to the neighbor, but they don't want their name mentioned, so let's call them the Beckers. And Mrs. Becker called Mrs. Monk and said, you know, your dining room window faces our living room window, and there's just a little garden in between. We're ready to move our Seder table, our dining room table, into the living room. We'll open up our living room window, you open up your dining room window, and you'll be able to hear us. We can have the Seder together. You'll be in your house, we'll be in our house. She said, you would do that for me? She said, yeah, of course. Our children love you. You're like a bubby to them. And the next morning, Mr. Becker says to Mrs. Monk, this is unbelievable. He says, I don't want to do this just the first night of Pesach, because what happens if it doesn't work? How are we going to fix it up for the second night? Let's have a trial run. Could you believe that? So they did it Shabbos HaGodel. And Shabbos HaGodel, which is a few days before Pesach, Mr. Becker made Kiddush by his living room window. He had the table in there, and she was by the dining room window in her house, Mrs. Monk, and it worked great. And she knew the Seder was going to be wonderful because she could hear them perfectly. And she told me, Erev Pesach, you won't believe this. There was a knock on the door. The children of the Beckers, they brought her a kaira, a Seder plate, with the zroya, the mora, the charoisis, the salt water. It's unbelievable. And the Seder was fabulous. It went to 1 o'clock in the morning. Quarter after 1, she told me there's a knock on the door. She's wondering, who's coming? Eliyahu, no, he came already a half hour ago. No. You know what happened? It was her children and grandchildren. They walked over 20 minutes. They stopped their Seder, and they asked their mother, Oma, you know, that's how they say it in German. Oma, how was the Seder? She says, how was the Seder? It was fabulous. They said, what do you mean fabulous? She said, you know, I've been living next to the Beckers for 5 years. I had no idea. I had no idea that they are Yekisha people, German people like us. They sang all the Nagunim that Daddy sang all the years. And her son Yehuda started laughing. And Mrs. Monk told me, she said to her son Yehuda, why are you laughing? He said, Ma, I don't want to tell you. A couple of days ago, the Beckers called me. And they asked me if I could make a voice recording of all the Nagunim that Daddy sang at the Seder. He said he and his children, they would learn them. So that's what they would sing at the Seder. Could you believe that? And Mrs. Monk told me, I didn't know this, that the Yekisha people, the German people, they sing at the end of the Seder, Adon Olam, Yigdal, and Enkel Akeno. I had no idea that's what they sang. That's connection. Rabbi Vorhand, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, boy, he would have been so proud of that family, as we all should be. And that's the lesson that we learned tonight. We learned the lesson of connection, and we learned the lesson that Heichal Moshe, that's what we stand for. Hashem should bless every single one of you. Let us say the Keteras. Let us include everyone. Let us elevate our Avos Yisrael and our Avos Hashem and our Avos HaTorah. And we will be like the Kruvim, our hands up to Shemayim, our faces towards each other. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
Shavua Tov. A gute Woche to the old friends from Rabbi Vorhand, Heichal Moshe in Manhattan, that you come every year to help that this holy place exists and can give what they're doing day and night to people to come and declaring Torah, Chesed, U'Maasim Tovim. This is 20 years since Reb Zevi, the tzaddik from the Rabbi Vorhand, left the Holocaust, that he gives his life there and saves so much kids there. Come to Manhattan and build this synagogue, Heichal Moshe. And today, Badel L'chaim Tovim, Rabbi Reb Moshe Shlite, he gives his life day and night that this place to be open 24 hours a day. I know many people, they will never go to a synagogue, but in this synagogue they feel themselves comfortable. In this synagogue you can find everybody, Chassidim, Misnagdim, religious, not religious. Everybody feels their home. Because the Rabbi Vorhand gives his heart for the people. And he brought Jungelai that sit and learning not for themselves. They teach also people they want to have connected with the Torah. They give them chesed, they give them to eat, everything. I speak to you from Eretz Israel, and I ask you, please, help the Rabbi Vorhand to keep going and have the place open. You will be a shutaf in Torah, in Chesed, in Maisim Tovim. Ashloisha dvorim oilom oimet. The whole world stays a Torah va'avodo ve'gemilas chasodim, and this is Heichal Moshe, and this is Rabbi Vorhand. And in this chus, Hashem will help, that Hashem will take down the whole sickness, and we will be healthy, and we will see the Geula Shleime b'meira b'yomeinu. Amen.
Beis Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beis Yakov miyam lo yeis. Hoy so Yehuda lekadeshoi, Yisrael mam shelo Yisov. Havayom lo vayonos, Hayardein Yisrael leyochor. Hehorim rokedu, Chaylim gevo eskivnei Yitzchak. Ma'alecho hayom, ki Yisraelus. Hayodei tisoy leyochor. מלפני ידיים חולי יורד, מלפני אלוקי יעקב, ההופכי, העצור, האגם, מוים, חלומי שמיינו emoyim.
A gute Woche. My name is Yakov Yosef Felberbaum. 5 years ago, I was visiting a family member for Shabbos in the Upper East Side, Manhattan, and Mount Sinai Hospital. Shabbos morning, I asked my friend if there is any Hasidic Shtieble with a mikveh in Manhattan. So he answered me, sure, you can walk to the west side, to the wonderful Vorhand Shul, West End 191st, Besmeder Heichal Moshe, and there you will find everything you are looking for. I was so happy about this information, and immediately I started walking to the west side. After a long walk through the park, finally I got there. I came into the shul, and I was so surprised that everyone was so welcoming me and so warm to me. And the main thing was that the roof by himself came over to me, and he made me feel so comfortable, welcome, and taken care of. I was so surprised to see such a beautiful place, such a nice shul, with good people, warm people, and all types of people together. After the mikveh and a warm davening experience, the roof himself called me up to his house to join the Shabbos Seder. I must say I really enjoyed it, begashmias, berachnias. I was so amazed to see so many guests, all types of people from all sides of the world. Everyone is sitting together with such a achdus and schmoozing together the Torah, listening to the Torah of the roof, and singing together Zemiras. It was something special. I was amazed. The rest is history. I was like, wow, this is something. After coming many times and joining the shul for Shabbos and the Shabbos Seders with the roof and family, I still feel the same amazing good feeling I felt from this place the first time I came. I can say that I personally know that the roof and the Rebbetzin are putting in this place only three things: their whole heart and neshama, their whole energy and effort, and a lot of money. This is besides that I know that they are helping and supporting and encouraging many singles and second marriages a lot with shidduchim, advice, help, support, encouragement, and much more. So every dollar you are giving for such an important, wonderful, chushev place full of tzedukah v'chesed is counted a lot. Give a lot and Hashem will repay you with much more, with all the bruchas and all hashpuas from Buna, Chaim, Zoyne, a lot of naches and everything you need. And Hashem should help that the Ruv and the Rebbetzin, the whole family, all the Mispalim, the whole shul, all the Mishtat from here tonight should have all the bruchas. A good Tov.
Ay,
no interruptions, no disturbance, very obedient and patient. It was a pleasure this evening being together virtually. It's my fervent wish that next year, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll be together in person in Yerushalayim. Meanwhile, thank you very much for your support, for your love for the Kehillah, and for your dedication. A good Tvach and a good Yar. Thank you.